Have you ever heard from, or perhaps said to, a friend something along the effect with the phrase starting, what you need to do is, or what you should do is, often presented in the guise of offering friendly advice? I'm Clark Korb, a holistic health practitioner offering some pragmatic insights to help you live a happier, more empowered life and embody your optimum potential. Today, I will be covering the distinction between projection and reflection in terms of how we interact with other people, both in regard to our own role as potentially projecting and reflecting, as well as what it feels like being on the receiving end of these behaviors. So, projection, to start, is an active form of transmission. And I love looking at this in terms of analogies that we understand in everyday practical life. So, like a movie or a display projector, it must contain a light source. And this projection stems from an intentionality to relay a specific meaning or image. This image is directionally focused onto another object, which is reflective. In today's context of projection as it relates to human behavior, projection is typically defined as either a defense or a survival mechanism where a person attributes their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or behaviors onto someone else. And a key piece of this is that this stems from an unconscious repulsion from that own negative trait or impulse. Have you ever perhaps known someone who condemns someone else for being a raging gossip, yet in their next breath they're engaging in the very same behavior themselves? So, this example is someone who is unconsciously and hypocritically projecting their own negative aspect or judgment about a certain behavior onto someone else without recognizing their own ownership of the very same quality. So, this projection offers a way of saving face, so to speak. It's a way of avoiding confronting one's own faults or inner conflicts and maintaining a more positive self image by identifying and usually condemning a negatively regarded attribute in someone else. Carl Jung is attributed with the quote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And I believe Jung was credited with developing the concept of the shadow, which is the unconscious or repressed parts of ourselves that we haven't fully integrated into the whole of our being. And with these shadow elements, we tend to carry judgment about these repressed or unintegrated aspects in some way. I did a video a while back on how good is your judgment with more detail on how to identify and release internal judgment as well as external judgments, and touching a little bit how it plays into projection. If you haven't taken a look at that, I recommend doing so. And today we're focusing a bit more on how this projection takes place and where it comes from and how to identify it. So these judgments that we unconsciously project onto other people typically stem from a variety of internally harbored feelings about ourselves. So these internally harbored feelings can have a wide range of sort of, for lack of a better word, negative attributes, and I'll cover a few that are quite common. One is insecurity, perhaps weakness, self-loathing, jealousy, disappointment, disapproval, shame, guilt, embarrassment, intolerance, being unacceptable, or needing to justify one's feeling better about one's own choices or behavior or place in life. Instead of recognizing our own internal feelings and the source of them, it may feel easier to project them outward onto others rather than confront our own discomfort in this and reconcile the source of these discomforts. Again, this projection is done unconsciously. Now, on the opposite side of projection is reflection. Reflection is a passive form of transmission. And going back to our analogy of the video projector, a reflection is a surface that lacks its own light source. It is the screen onto which an image is projected and subsequently redirected elsewhere, in this case toward the viewer's field of vision. The reflector does not dictate the image to be shown, and in fact, its purpose is to serve the viewer in better understanding or perceiving what is being projected. So having an accurate reflecting surface is extremely valuable in this case of the video projector. And similarly, self-reflection is an invaluable tool on our own. Practicing methods of self-inquiry or journaling can be extremely helpful for any number of things, including this particular example of potentially identifying any sources or examples of projection. You might ask the question, when do I notice feeling any of the above feelings or self-judgments that I listed above? However, self-reflection remains insufficient to see everything about ourselves. A while back, I also did a video on identifying your blind spots, and in that video I mentioned that relationships are an important type of a mirror, an example of a mirror, to help us identify our own blind spots. That's particularly helpful here in this example of unintegrated aspects that we may potentially be projecting. What is paramount, however, is when seeking feedback or guidance outside of our own reflection, we need to use discernment to ask someone to help us who is a skilled reflector instead of a projector. Which leads us to the next point. How do you determine whether you are projecting or reflecting? Qualities of projection tend to be relatively common and by and large following under the umbrella of offering unsolicited advice or judgment in the case as it may be. Are you actively pushing or projecting an agenda, even if you're just trying to help? Are you making an assessment as to what might be best for someone else or possibly even condemning them based on your own values or ideals? This might look like trying to help someone make healthier lifestyle choices regarding diet or exercise, or trying to help a single person find a partner, or trying to help someone who appears to be struggling professionally or financially become more self-sufficient. In each of these cases, it may very well be the case that an individual could use assistance, but if they're not asking for it and you're offering it in an unsolicited or pushed or agenda-driven fashion, that's projection. Now, in the case where someone is asking for your help, there can still be a tendency to offer or deliver the help in the form of a projection. And one way to identify this is if you're offering a prescription or a directive of what you need to do is, or you should. This isn't necessarily categorically true in all contexts, but in most cases, anytime one of us has the gall to direct what someone else needs to do, you might want to evaluate whether there's a little bit of projection going on there. So on the flip side of this, what are qualities of reflection or someone who is reflective? Going back to that analogy, a reflective is passive in the sense of it's not steering the agenda. One helpful way of doing that is to ask open-ended questions, to draw out an elaboration of someone else's intentions, their desires, their struggles, whatever it is they're working through. Listening without judgment or trying to steer the narrative to a particular outcome. Really embodying that being like the movie screen. The movie screen's job is to help the viewer better perceive what is being offered with improved clarity and understanding. One way to really improve this practice is to start with yourself. This is identifying your own repressed shadow elements, per se. Doing so helps you resolve or integrate potential sources for projection and clear any residual charge that you may have when interacting with other people. Like anything else, it's kind of like that self-love gives you a fuller capability from which to love others. In this sense, becoming more clearly reflective on your own processes helps you become a more neutral reflector for other people. Some questions that might be useful would be, when have I been in a state of projection or offering unsolicited advice? Where did that come from? What was the motivation behind it? What of the judgments that I listed above or those negative feelings do I still carry or have I carried in the past about myself? Am I happy with my own choices in life and the place where I am in life? Do I feel the need to condemn others for their own places in life? If so, what's underneath that? What's going on behind that? What judgment underlies that? Am I open to be in the practice of choosing to be inspired by those who appear more in alignment with what I desire? And the movie screen analogy breaks down a little bit in this context as we can be thoughtfully reflective and still help people. But in doing so, when we're offering help from that place of neutral reflection, there are a couple of helpful guidelines to that. One would be only responding to explicit requests for help or advice on a topic. If it's unsolicited, you can keep your opinions to yourself, more or less. Where applicable, if someone is asking for advice or guidance, it's very useful to reflect back to that person apparent self-contradictions or conflicts that they might not see. For example, identifying one thing that they've stated that they want where their actions are perhaps misaligned with generating that outcome. Another useful piece in terms of identifying guidance is, again, to offer reflections as to what has been helpful from your own experience or wisdom. Some phrases like, what was most helpful for me in a similar situation was, or I've had the best success or results with XYZ, or I felt so much greater relief, peace, or joy, or happiness, or lightness, whatever it is, when ... This is very different from saying what you need to do or you should. Just being conscious about these distinctions is very helpful, and it's a night and day difference in terms of the transmission of what you're able to offer someone when they're truly seeking help and you're in a place that you can help them. So my call to action for you is to identify times when you have been on the receiving end of someone who was projecting onto you, as well as someone who was consciously and neutrally reflecting back to you. Which one felt better? Maybe they both were uncomfortable. And also on the flip side of that, identify sometimes when you've been on the giving end of projection and reflection. Likely we all have done this to some degree. Which one felt better? Or were both of these uncomfortable? Or did both feel good? Let me know in the comments below. If you know of anyone who may benefit from what I've shared here, please forward this video to them. And if you found some value in what I've discussed today, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. It's free, it takes only a moment, and it really helps support the growth of the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in.